A man named Sohail Ahmed has an incredible article in Vice News explaining what it's like to grow up as a closeted gay Islamic extremist. Really fascinating stuff. So he said the following, quote, "On 9/11, my hatred was crystallized into something solid and pure. I was 9. My family is from Kashmir in Pakistan, and they raised me and 4 younger siblings in East London. When I was 6, they were befriended by another family in our tower block who swiftly turned them from pretty much apolitical into austere, harsh Salafi Islamists. From then, I saw the world through the prism of radical Islam, and every attempt to make sense of reality was analyzed through it. Life was a battle between good and evil, belief and unbelief. There was a huge contradiction between who I truly was and the odious reactionary views I held. Always the internal voice saying, 'This is wrong,' while being so convinced of my beliefs that they ended up drowning out any semblance of reason. Perhaps the first and greatest of these contradictions was my being a virulent homophobe who was also gay. I've always been attracted to boys, ever since the age of about 8 or 9. I had these feelings pulling me toward them in an enchanting way. Hitting puberty very early, I started messing around with boys at 14 years old. It would always be unknown people, strangers met online or just at secluded spots, because nobody could ever find out. Afterward, I would be so disgusted and utterly ashamed. However intense the pleasure, afterward nothing remained but a hollow ache. There was a prophetic narration that says, 'When a man lies with another man, the throne of heaven shakes.' That's how serious it was. I truly felt like dying." All right, so he goes on to explain that he literally considered doing a terrorist attack. This is how deep he was in Salafism and jihadism, in essence, is that he said, "I considered doing a terrorist attack at one point." And then he goes on to explain, quote, "I began to listen to the doubts and internal nagging voice around 21, looking into evolution, intellectual and philosophical arguments against theism, and studying Enlightenment thinkers really opened up this whole door of reason. The mind-forged manacles, I don't know that word, which is pretty sad, of blind and dogmatic faith began to loosen. I swiftly abandoned the whole project of revolutionary Islam after the glaring fallacies and absurdities were illuminated by the warm glow of rationality and empiricism. In a fiery argument with my parents, I spat that Islam probably wasn't even true. They went through my internet history looking for atheist material or whatever, and they found, well, other stuff. My father said I was worse than a dog. He made me go through exorcisms to cast out the devils that were obviously possessing me, and for 2 months I was exorcised every day. After 2 months of this pseudo-spiritual pantomime, I tried to kill myself because it was so fucked up and distressing. The attempt failed, and I had to move out and leave the toxic surroundings, or I really would have died. Paradoxically, when radical, I was much more sexually involved with guys than after coming out, because it was so wrong and forbidden, it became something fetishized, and thus enchanting and tempting." All right, so I only gave you maybe, I broke the article up. This is like 30% of the article maybe, or 40% of the article. Go check it out on Vice News. It's absolutely incredible. It's a great piece. It had me locked in from beginning to end. And there's a lot to take away from this. So first of all, everything he's saying is, it's almost like on some level, it's obvious to us because we've covered countless stories of the Christian fundamentalists who are super anti-gay. And it just always happens that the loudest, most vehement anti-gay people are always blowing some dude in a New Jersey Turnpike bathroom. That's just the way it works. And a lot of that has to do with when you're raised in a super religious household and you actually internalize the values system, and then you see other people who are gay and open and happy about it, you're jealous and you're pissed because you want to engage in the same things they're engaging in, but you have this moral code that was downloaded into your brain, which is preventing you from doing it, which is why oftentimes you see the guys lash out and they're super anti-gay. You know, whether it's Ted Haggard, he was one who was caught, or it's somebody like Brian Fisher, who almost certainly at some point will be caught, but if he doesn't get caught, I'm still convinced he's deep in that closet, or any of the other ones. I mean, there are lists of like the top 10 or top 20 anti-gay pastors, anti-gay preachers who are gay. So he's describing that in great detail here, and I think the solution, or the way that we can get some people away from the fundamentalist religious ideologies, is to point out that your innate feeling, or in this, the sexual desire that these guys have for other men, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, this idea that this very basic urge where you're not really hurting anybody else, that like, oh, well, this is wrong. Why would that be any more wrong than hunger? Like, you're hungry and you're craving some food and you eat some food and then you're not hungry anymore. For guys like this, you're horny and you want to fuck a dude and then you fuck a dude and then it's over. And then you feel fine. We have to try to get that through to people, that as long as you're not physically hurting anybody else, what you're doing is not wrong. The same thing goes with drug use. I mean, that's another thing that some extremists might be totally against, and you can never do any, ever. Well, but wait a second. If you're somebody who smoke weed and you like smoking weed and you haven't smoked it in a while and you feel like smoking weed, well, why not smoke weed and then, scratch the itch and then you're good. And then 3 days from now, you might want to do it again. Who cares? You're not hurting anybody. And it's something that you want to do, and it's innate. You know you want to do it. You can't try to pretend. I mean, for sexuality especially, you can't just pretend. I'm not into that. I'm not into that. That's like, everybody knows, and I know this is always TMI when I talk about it, but I've spoken about what kind of women I'm into by and large. I like big hips and big asses on women, okay? And I think about me trying to deny that. And I laugh. Because I can't deny, I can't fight that. I just like it. There's nothing I can do to stop it. It just is what it is. It's no different for a gay person. And once you understand that whatever your preference is, that other people have different preferences that are just as strong, well, then the only answer can be tolerance and open-mindedness and reason. And to explain to people that the innate secular values that you have are not wrong. As long as you're not hurting anybody, you can do it. And then also a very important final thing I want to mention about this. This is the power of belief. So there are a lot of people who, on the left, who are anti-Sam Harris and anti-New Atheists, and I've always maintained from the beginning that I view myself as kind of in between the two crowds, where I agree with the progressive side on many, many things, and how they focus on geopolitics and imperialism and stuff like that. So I agree with the progressives on that. And with the New Atheists, you'll never find an instance of me saying that they're just flat out wrong when talking about the link between doctrine and action. Because they're not wrong about that. They're 100% right about that, and they're some of the only people talking about that. Now, sometimes they might over-invoke it, and sometimes a specific terrorist attack might be a little more complicated, where the motivations for it were a mix of anger over intervention and believing in ideology, so it does get complicated, don't get me wrong. But here we have a perfect example of exactly what Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and guys like that are talking about. When they say, no, you don't get it, you can be totally divorced from any rational terrestrial grievance. You can have no claim whatsoever against something that happened to you brought about by, big bad evil American foreign policy in the West. That could have nothing to do with anything. You could have never been affected negatively ever. But simply based on the fact that you were raised in a fundamentalist religious household, in a Salafi household, you believe I should do terrorism. I should do an attack because he said at the beginning that he began to see the world because his parents were converted and he was part of this group as well. He began to see the world as good versus evil, belief versus unbelief. So anybody who doesn't believe, not only in Islam, but in his specific far-right interpretation of Islam, that you're evil then. So if you're a Shia Muslim, if you're a moderate Sunni, if you're an atheist for sure, if you're a Christian, well, you're just the bad guy. And it's not because those guys ever did anything wrong to you. It's because you are believing this very fundamentalist interpretation of the religion. So this is what they mean when they talk about the link between belief and action. And you can see it's perfectly clear here But you could also see it, for example, with cults. There are cults that everybody killed themselves. They all killed themselves. Why? Because they actually happened to believe the nonsense that the charismatic leader was saying when he said, hey, there's an alien spaceship coming behind the fucking comet and we all need to put on our Nikes and kill ourselves. I forget the name of that group, but that was one of the things, basically. One of the cults that did that. And there are plenty of examples of this. So, if you actually believe the myths and believe the fairy tales, you will be inclined to act on it if you actually believe it. So this is a great example of that right here, and it just so happened in this case, we lucked out that his innate sense of this life I'm living is a lie, and I'm really a gay dude and I really have secular values, that innate sense was he was able to override the indoctrination, and by the help of reading rational thinkers and secularists, he's able to say, okay, yeah, no, I disagree with this and this is bullshit. And by the way, he goes on, he's not an atheist anymore. He doesn't say he's an atheist. He says, no, now I'm basically a deist. So whatever, he might be a cultural Muslim, if you will, and I believe in God, but not a God who reads your thoughts, and just it's one of those things. So we need to help get people to the point where that innate secular sense of right and wrong overrides whatever kind of fundamentalist religious indoctrination happens to be downloaded into their brain. And yes, we shouldn't deny the fact that some people really do believe in the most fundamentalist extreme interpretations of religion.